This is Claire, and in this episode, I'll literally focus on physical well-being. A couple of weeks or months ago, I happened to have been going to church and we were being taught about the way to look after yourself. And one of the things that really struck me was when you think of how physical well-being does play quite a very important aspect in our day-to-day life. And I thought today just to come on to this recording and have a bit of a chat about physical well-being. So when you're thinking about physical well-being, there's something you need to think about is the ability to maintain a healthy quality of life that will allow you to be able to get the most out of your daily activities without undue fatigue or physical stress. We live in a world where we are kind of every so often inundated and forced to do so many different things that you end up at the end of the day feeling fatigued and stressed. But if you are able to maintain a healthy quality of life, you will be in a state of a good physical well-being. It is important for me to highlight at this moment is that your body is important. Sometimes the way we work or the way we do stuff, we usually think like, hang on a minute, I don't need my body. And also we are living in a world where the relevance of the body is kind of in a way being redefined quite a lot. And not so much emphasis is put on looking after your body, but I would like to emphasize that you need your body. If you don't have your body, you'll not be able to do the many things that you can be able to do in your physical body. So your body is important, and you need a healthy, thriving body to be able to carry out anything, including a spiritual mandate here on earth for those of us who have some form of faith. And if you don't even have a form of faith, for you to be able even to do anything while here on this world, you definitely need a healthy and a thriving body. So one of the things that you need to think about are some of the issues or some of the factors that will affect our physical well-being. I mean, as I said, well-being is currently a buzzword, particularly after COVID-19. It's something that a lot of people are talking about. A lot of companies are talking about the well-being of their staff and things like that. But there are actually some important things to think about when it comes to your physical well-being, and things like your diet, so what you eat, the lifestyle, your environment, and things like that. Things like stress all do contribute to your physical well-being, and I'll talk a little bit about them as we go along. Just before I go into talking about those factors that affect your physical well-being, there are things that I would like to bring to attention. Number one, taking care of your body, particularly in the earlier years, is like making an investment. And I love to call it a health bank, where one day in your life, at some point, you will need to withdraw from that health bank. So for example, if you're in your early 20s, early 30s, it is important for you to make some adjustments to your physical health and invest a little bit in your physical health or in your body, because when you get to the 70s or 80s, it's the deposits that you've been making in that health bank that you'll be able to withdraw. Just to talk about it, like kind of to give an example, if you don't bank any money, you earn any kind of money, and all you do is just squander the money and eat it, and you're not thinking about investing, it'll get to a time when you have a rainy day and you'll want to withdraw, and there'll be nothing in the bank that you'll need to withdraw. And it's the same thing if you don't take some opportunities and some conscious decisions to look after or to take care of your body, particularly in those earlier years. It will get to a point that you will want to withdraw from your health bank, and there will be nothing for you to withdraw from. Having said that, it's never too late to make adjustments. So it doesn't matter the time when you're watching this video, you can still make some differences, and those differences can still help you irrespective of the stage of life in which you are at. One of the things I've already mentioned is when it comes to the time to withdraw, one of the things you always have to ask yourself, will your deposit be zero? Will it be negative, or how will it look like? So sometimes I'm a very, I will say, kind of active individual, and I love being physically active. And one of the things that I do is I love running. So I go a bit like outside for jogs and things like that. And there are times that I definitely don't feel like going out. Like maybe it's been really raining quite a lot in the UK recently. And sometimes you wake up in the morning, it's raining, or you come back from the work, the times are changing, and it's rather quite late, and it feels like a bit dark, and you're like, oh, I'm really tired, I've had a busy day, and I don't feel like it. But then when I remember every single adjustment that I'm making is gonna have an impact later on in life, that in itself does motivate me to get out there, put on my running shoes, get on my track on, and I'm off for a run. So again, it's just one of those things that should motivate you to think about or analyze and feel like when it comes to that point of withdrawal, how will your account look like? And just something that somebody mentioned to me a couple of years back, I can't even remember who it was, but it's something that has stuck with me. Don't spend your healthy years looking for wealth, that you will have to use your wealth looking for your health. A lot of people are out chasing after money, chasing after wealth, which is amazing. There's nothing wrong about that. But just remember, when you have to overdo it at the expense as well of your body, looking after yourself, that's something that maybe one day you might have to kind of, in a way, pay back with the wealth that you're trying to find, so that you can get your health back. So just whenever you're tempted to keep going, just remind yourself to take a break and to remember you don't want to do so much running after wealth in your and at the expense of your health, that one day you'll have to use your wealth to try to get your health back. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about the place of nutrition or food in our physical well-being, and then the second part I'll talk about other things that are in our environment or our lifestyle that can contribute towards our physical well-being. Here you can see, of course, that image is not really one of the images of a balanced diet. Of course, there are some nuts there, there's some popcorns, but most of this picture that you're seeing there is literally processed food. We live in a world where a lot of people, because of changes in our busyness, we're trying to really reach out. Everything has become so instant. We want to really go, everything is going so fast, and we're trying to catch up with the fast pace of life. The problem with that is it gets a point that we have kind of in a way shifted or changed the way we consume our food. So we want everything on the go. That's why the intake of things like takeaway is very much on an increase. Things like convenience food or these ultra processed food, and these of course do have an impact on health. So that's why I began by just showing this picture to show this is the kind of a food style that a lot of us are adopting because of our busyness or the busyness of our schedules. One of the things that I've started to think about every time, I'm sure you'll have heard of that, you are what you think. Constantly what you think about, that's what you become. Your thoughts manifest themselves and they form you, an individual you. But when it comes again to what you eat, you are what you eat, because the food that you eat does become the fuel for the different physiological activities that your body is involved in. You need energy for your body to be able to function, and anytime you're eating food is like going to a fuel station and putting in gasoline or petrol or diesel into your car. So your body here will be like the car, and of course the fuel that you're giving it is the food that you're eating. That food that you're eating does usually get processed, and that is what keeps you alive at some point after the food is processed and utilized in your body. So if you're constantly feeding and processing, having ultra processed food, that's like what is called the junk food, is your fuel for your body. It gets to a point, if you put in like junk in, junk out, you can't really put in junk into your body and expect to get something healthy out of it. So again, one of the things to think about, particularly with the world where we're being constantly harassed to try work harder, to try work more hours and things like that, be careful, particularly with the choices that you make when it comes to your food intake, because that is the key factor that determines who you are. So what should we be eating? I've already mentioned the world that has literally changed upside down, and now we're being forced kind of in a way to go into literally most of what are called convenience food, because we think we don't have time anymore to make a healthy meal, or maybe just because of also what is happening in the world at the moment, the economic downtown at the moment, where most countries in the world are facing quite really difficult, perilous moments. Like in the UK, where I currently live at the moment, you find on the news, when you read, there are kind of a lot of changes and shifts around the cost of food. Everyone is talking about inflation. So it gets to a point, you find that even the supermarket brands have become quite expensive. The things that we have always gone for, those staples, have increased in the price, and you can easily be in a way swayed into wanting to think like healthy food is very expensive. And of course, if you've got to choose between bills and food, what is it you're gonna be going for? So it can become very easy for you to think like it's not possible to achieve a healthy diet on a budget. But I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about what we should be eating. So in the UK, there is what is called the Eatwell guide. If you're like in the US, there will be the Eatwell plate. I think different nations call this differently, but I'm going to use the example of the UK, as I said, is where I'm currently based. So the Eatwell guide has in particular 5 different food groups. So here you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 major food groups that you can think about. So when you're looking at these in particular, you realize with these Eat Well guide, so here in particular, it does emphasize the bigger portion of your food should come from fruits and vegetables. Why is it so? Of course, fruits and vegetables have a lot of different nutrients and micronutrients that are important for a healthy our body to be healthy. So again, the bigger portion of your plate, try to think of having a plate, and then when you have that plate, you're trying to divide it so that quite a big proportion of what goes on your plate will be fruits and vegetables. And it's usually advised to eat at least 5 portions. Some people debate and say 7 portions, but it's 5 portions of fruits and vegetables. Again, it's always nice to try and aim to eat a variety, and that's why it's like rainbow of colors. Try to eat different things and not just the same color, because the different colors actually indicate different phytonutrients that are present in the fruits and vegetables. So when you aim to go for a rainbow, you end up getting the different phytonutrients that are present within those fruits and vegetables. Then you also have this portion here where you have the starchy foods, so like things like potatoes, bread, pasta, and all the starchy carbohydrates. One thing that I usually think about when I think of these starchy foods is always try to go for the brown counterparts, because if you have, let's say, brown bread or brown pasta, it does actually help, or brown rice, you have more fiber in there. If you're having the whole grain, you have more fiber. They will have less added salt, fat, and sugar in there, and that can actually, fiber is good because it helps with the bowel movement. It helps with prevention of things like colorectal cancer, etc. Like things like bloating. You'll not have issues with bloating, constipation, if you are consuming enough fiber. So again, try to aim to ensure that you've got quite a good amount of these whole grains, or again the potatoes, the rice, the pasta, etc. Then you've got here a proportion where you've got this, which will be like dairies and alternatives. So if you're like on a vegan or plant-based diet or vegetarian diet, you might be consuming, let's say, alternative milks, but there's also things like cheese. These are things that you need to keep in moderation, as well as the oils and spreads. So the things that we use like for frying and our cooking and the spreads on our bread, try to limit that. And of course, we have our protein, where you still need a good amount of protein, and the protein sources are so different. Let's say if you are on a plant-based diet, you can still get your protein from things like chickpeas, beans, pulses, etc. But if you are not on a plant-based diet, you can eat your meat, your lean meat being like one of the best options. You realize that also we have this category here, which are literally what I showed at the beginning, those processed food, things like cookies, crisps, all the sauces that you might have for foods, and chocolate. Those are things that you need to eat in small amounts and less often, because most of the time they are dense in energy and calories, and of course they can end up adding more on what you don't need to have. The other thing that you need to think about again is ensuring you're properly hydrated. So you need to have at least 6 to 8 glasses of water, or you can also as well have things like sugar-free drinks, which include things like teas and coffees. Those do contribute towards your intake of fluids, but of course try to limit things like fruit juices and smoothies to just a maximum of 150 ml per day. So in the UK, for example, it's usually advised that a woman should consume 2,000 calories a day, whereas a man 2,500 calories if you want to maintain weight. But if you are aiming, let's say, to lose weight, you need to eat less than 2,000 calories. And of course, the NHS does recommend not losing more than 500 grams of weight every week. So you might as well need to work on trying to avoid restricting too much, because if you restrict too much, of course there are chances that you may end up losing weight, but in unhealthy ways. So the other thing to think about in particular will be when you're looking at this, you can easily be able to think of it and say like, okay, but well, this is something that is so particular, because particularly all these Eatwell guide does kind of in a way look very exotic. So these are foods that maybe if you're not a person that is born and bred in the UK, you might think like, hang on a minute, this doesn't really look like something that I'm familiar with. And the good thing is that, of course, I mentioned the fruits and vegetables as something to think about, because if you're eating more fruits and vegetables, you actually can reduce chances of things like inflammation. And fruits and vegetables are really good in preserving the cells and the integrity of the cells, and can protect against things like inflammation, which can result in cancer and things like that. So as I was mentioning, if you might look at this and you can go like, this is really out of the world for me. This is not something that I'm used to. And the good news is that if you are, let's say, from an African or Caribbean descent, there's actually the Afro-Caribbean Eatwell guide. And something, again, I need to mention before I look at this is one of the things that you need to think about whenever you're going to do shopping for your food, always check the labels. So like in the UK, we use a traffic light system. It might be the same in whichever country you're watching from. So this traffic light system tells you the amount of calories that are present in the food that you're eating. It tells you what proportion is fat, what proportion is saturated fat, sugars, and salt. So if you find something that is red, it means danger. Try to avoid going for that. If you find something that is amber, it's like borderline. But mostly if you find things that are green, it shows that they are much more in the healthy regime. So try to aim going for foods that are within the green levels. So I'm going to talk about the Afro-Caribbean Caribbean Eatwell guide. So you see here the diversity of the fruits is different. So when you're looking at the fruits and vegetables, there are things like soursop, there are things like tamarind, there are things like pak choy. Those are kind of what we'll call generally exotic if you're in the UK, exotic fruits and vegetables. But if you're, let's say, like from a country like Kenya, from Nigeria, West Africa, East Africa, you'll realize that some of these things will be indigenous fruits in your country. So things like guavas, things like coconut, those are some of the fruits and vegetables that you can still include in your diet and aim to have at least 5 portions of the same a day. And then when you're looking at these starchy carbohydrates, so there'll be things like cassava. If you're going to make things like pounded yam for your swallow, if you're from West Africa, or if you want to make, let's say, ugali or saza from Zimbabwe, all those different flours that are used to make these different starchy foods are again recognized within this Eatwell guide. We have things like agege bread, that's white bread, but of course if you're going to eat white bread, try to minimize its intake, because again it can be caloric load might be higher, so you might want to decide to go for the brown options rather than going for the white options. There are things like injera, which is a typical staple food for Ethiopians. That's something that can be included, plantains, etc. Again, when you're looking at these dairy alternatives, there are things that might be so familiar to your country. You can fill in whatever you're thinking of, like soya drink. It can be milk, that is whole milk, soy, semi-skimmed milk, etc. And when you're looking again on things like the proteins, you've got again the pulses, the beans. You can identify things like soy chunks. There can be tilapia fish, lentils, quinoa, tuna, all those different types of proteins that you can see there. One of the other things that, again, of course, from Afro-Caribbean descent, we are quite good in frying our food quite a lot. So if you're going to be deep frying, let's say you're going to be making something, patties or meat pies, and you want to deep fry, be careful. Think about which oils you're using, because I've found quite a few friends that will tell me, oh, I do deep fry my food and I use olive oil. The challenge of deep frying food with olive oil is that the melting point for olive oil is very low, so you end up actually destroying all the nice nutritional value from the olive oils when you start to deep fry it, use it for deep frying. So olive oil is basically better used for shallow frying or in salads, but when it comes to deep frying, you're better off using things like vegetable oil, because that tends to have a higher melting point. The other thing as well, we love our palm oil. Be careful with it, because palm oil is quite a saturated fat, and saturated fats do have a correlation with having a higher cholesterol level, and cholesterol has been associated with issues to do with heart, where it can actually deposit in different arteries, and that can cause its own impact on a human body. You'll see outside here, again, we've got some of these examples of our treats, I will say. So things like malt beverages, we've got things like fried doughs, we've got puff dumplings, mandazis. You can have all those different pies. You try to eat them less often and in small amounts, because again they tend to have a high caloric load, and of course you don't want to really end up feeding yourself on too much calories, because that does impact on things like obesity and overweight. And of course we know that obesity is actually a global epidemic, and unfortunately it's permeating quite fast and so rapidly into the developing countries, which basically are trying quite a lot to adopt a typical Western diet, and that has got its impact as well. So you can still eat your local food, but just again trying to ensure that your plate is filled with more fruits and vegetables. Don't shy away from things like sweet potatoes, cassava and yam, but of course you can limit some of these like processed foods or ultra processed foods. One of the other things that I would like to emphasize at this stage is portion sizes. So when you're trying to think about the food that you're eating, I'm just going to try and bring out some of these resources that you can think about. When it comes to the portion sizes, always try to think about any food that you're eating. Am I eating according to the recommended portions? Because particularly for those people that are from an African descent, for example, we are kind of inclined to do quite a lot of work and things like that. So our food tends to be like on a higher side, and we love quite bigger portions. But just something to think about here is like, again, why it's important for you to think about the portion sizes, because they matter. They are key to eating a balanced diet. So if you want to eat a balanced diet, you need to be aware of the portion sizes, because if you're eating too much or not enough, you can end up with health risks as well. So if you're looking at this, for example, where things like bread, for a portion of bread will be like 34 to 36 grams. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? It's like one medium slice of bread. If it's like something like pasta, it's about 2 to 3 tablespoons for 75 grams of uncooked, and of course 150 grams of cooked. Things like boiled rice, again, it tells you 2 to 3 tablespoons. If you're having something like oat porridge, about 3 tablespoons. You know, somebody can think like, goodness me, this sounds really like very small. How can I be full at the end of the day? Remember, when you're talking about these portions, is like kind of in a way, it's not just one thing you're looking at, but you're looking at, let's say, if I'm going to have bread, I can have one medium slice of bread, and then I can have with 1 egg. So I'm having like my starchy food, but then an egg will contribute towards the protein, and maybe I can have a banana, which will contribute towards the fruit, and then I can have maybe a glass of milk, which will give me more calcium, but also you end up having a balanced diet. Just something to think about. Again, potatoes don't contribute towards your 5 a day, just normal potatoes, but if you've got things like sweet potatoes, parsnips, they do contribute towards 5 a day, because they are of course vegetables. Here again, when it comes to dairy or dairy alternatives, those people who are like on a plant-based diet or vegan diet, 200 ml is 1 glass. If you're having, let's say, yogurt, about 125 to 150 grams is like a standard pot. If you're thinking about, again, things like protein, like cooked oily fish is just 1 palm of a hand. If it's eggs, you need to a portion will look like 2 medium eggs. If you're having baked beans, again, it's 4 tablespoons. If you're having something like soya, it's 4 tablespoons. If you're having some nuts, again, it's a handful or a tablespoon. Something to think about, which gives you a portion. Here again, I'm not going to go into all the details, but this is information like if you can access it. Let's say if you go onto the British Dietetics Association, you can find all those different portion sizes, and that can help you to know what really does a portion look like. So if you go back again to look at or other thing again that you can look at here from the NHS, again, there are some recommendations of how a portion looks like. So again, in this document, it just highlights if you're eating like a medium apple, that's gonna be a fresh one, will be a portion. If you're eating like an avocado, half of it will be like a portion, etc. So again, if you're trying to find out the different things that you're consuming, whether you're eating enough or not, these are some links that I'll highly recommend that you can look at. Again, they'll give you some ideas of how a portion size looks like. Again, when you're eating, one of the things you need to think about is the times and the frequencies of eating. Let's say some of us will love to eat maybe too much into the night. If you're eating a lot into the night, you're not giving your body enough time to be able to start digesting the food before you are able to start eating it before you go to bed. So again, something that might be worthwhile trying to think about. Sorry, I had some issues with my lighting, so you might have seen that the screen went gray, darkish, because my battery was literally dying. So I was mentioning, like, when it comes to the frequency and the times when you eat are important. Some people do usually recommend and say, like, oh, breakfast is the most important food. So they say eat breakfast like a king or a queen, and then lunch like a middleman, and then dinner like a pauper, literally just having less food towards the end of the day, just because you really don't want to go to bed on a full tummy. So you are trying the much you can to ensure that you have actually, the body has started digesting the food that you have eaten before you are able to go to bed. There is one of the things that I know a lot of people do swear with, but they say, like, intermittent fasting does help a lot, and it's just literally where you allow some time in between the meals so that you start kind of, in a way, your body can start already finishing off the digestive, or maybe breaking down some of the food that you eat before you eat again. There are advantages of fasting in general, and I'll talk a little bit about them later, but intermittent fasting in particular, because it does kind of, in a way, provide the ability for the body to start breaking down any food that it has. And of course, it's been proven to be a really good way of increasing insulin sensitivity, and that means you can end up digesting your food a little bit much more better, and that has advantages or benefits of losing weight. When you're eating, or whenever you're choosing whenever to eat and things like that, always think about some of these vitamins and minerals. They are actually needed in small quantities, but play a really big role or major role in the physiology or physiological and body functions. So things like vitamin D has been shown to have really like major impacts on the immune function. And you might have realized, like, when COVID hit, a lot of people were saying, like, people of the ethnic minority groups, like, let's say in the UK, were most affected, and it's just because this group of people tend to have a lower vitamin D in their bodies, because of course our skin does kind of, in a way, limit the absorption of vitamin D. And of course also some of these roles that we end up working on require us to be indoors most of the time, so we're not getting enough sunshine. But even when we go out, our bodies are not able to absorb enough of those vitamin D that we need. So it's something to think about. So in particular, like during the winter months, one of my GPs told me, whether it's winter or summer, it's just always nice to try and do a little bit of taking like a supplement, just to ensure that you need to stay again within the recommended 10 microgram of vitamin D per day, so you're not ending up with toxicity issues. Vitamin C is important, again, for the immune function. We are heading into the winter months that we tend to have more prevalences of things like flus and colds. You just need to kind of, in a way, up your vitamin C intake. And vitamin C is one of those water-soluble vitamins, so very easy for the body to get rid of it, so you can never have toxicities from vitamin C. Things like vitamin B12, if you're constantly feeling fatigued, that might be something that you might want to check. Your blood works, you can easily ask your doctor to look at that, and once you start supplementing on that, or ensuring that your food is high in those contents of vitamin B12, that can actually boost your physical performance and your stamina. If you are on a plant-based diet or a vegan diet, that's something to watch up a lot about, because vitamin B12 is mainly produced from animal sources of food. So if you are not taking much or not taking animal foods at all, you might want to think of supplementing, because that can become an issue. One of the other things, again, when you're having all these nutrients and minerals to think about, always think about some of the things that have an impact on the gut, which is, of course, a lot of people are suggesting that the gut can be like the second brain, because it does modulate quite a lot of things in our bodies, which includes as well the immune function. So some of the things that you can do to look after your gut includes eating of fermented foods, yogurt, kimchi, like all those fermented foods, kefir, which are actually have those probiotics, which are good bacteria, but also you can end up increasing or upping your fiber intake, and fiber or carbohydrates or sugars are just good source of food for the bacteria that lives in your gut, and that helps to break down when the bacteria breaks down these carbohydrates, it does result in what are known as the short chain fatty acids, and these can be used for different functions in the body, like things like butyrate have been shown to have, again, anti-cancer effects. Something to think about when looking after your gut. One of the other things you need to think about when it comes to your physical well-being is stress. Of course, we live in a world where you can never avoid being stressed, but when you're stressed up, you end up being fearful, so you start to be afraid. When you are stressed up, stress is one of those things that can easily destroy your food habits. You can be somebody that is very disciplined and very okay with eating a balanced diet until you feel stressed up, where you can decide, you start to, like, kind of in a way having an unhealthy relationship with food. Some people end up binge eating. Some people can end up on things like alcohol to numb their stress. Some people can end up binge watching things like Netflix. Some people can go on an endless looking through social media. Some people can end up on drugs, both legal and illegal drugs, just as a way to try and distress. And one of the things that I highly recommend is looking at your stress levels, because stress can wreak a havoc when it comes to your physical well-being. So some of the things that you can do is looking at, for example, detoxing yourself or getting yourself rested. And one of the important things that can help you to rest well, or to get rid of some of these things, or to look even after your physical well-being, is sleep. It may look a little bit like it's so simple, but getting a decent night's sleep plays a very important role in our physical well-being. It's recommended for an adult to have about 6 to 8 hours of sleep every night. Why is it important? Because our bodies literally do recover when we sleep, and of course they are restored, and there's all those repair that occurs when we are sleeping. Some people find it so difficult to be able to sleep. So if you find it difficult to sleep, you might try to think about unwinding. You can try meditation, is a good way of unwinding at the end of the day. You can stay away from things like blue light, a light that is from computers, TVs, phones before bedtime. They suggest at least a minimum of an hour before that. Ensure that your room is properly ventilated. You have the temperature is okay, the lighting is okay. Particularly like now in the winter months, you might want to switch on your heating. But then if your room is too hot or too cold, you'll not be able to have a good night's sleep. And of course, you want to ensure that you have clean beddings. I'm sure you've realized that the day you've done laundry and changed your beddings, you tend to have a much more better sleep. So I'm just going to wrap up this whole recording by just talking about some practical things that can help us to look after our physical well-being. Number one, I mentioned fasting. Like, it's always nice. Of course, if you are like religious, you can do this for religious purposes. But if you're not, like, just taking a day or some time off food is really important, because it helps the body to detox itself. We are not meant to just keep on pumping food into our bodies without an end. It's always nice, and that's why it's important to look at the timings when you eat, because you need to leave your body to start breaking down what you've eaten before you can start fueling again. And that helps particularly with detoxing the body, but also it helps with ensuring that whatever you're eating is broken down, and that can be a good remedy in staying or keeping in shape. Practicing healthy eating, I've shown you the Eatwell guide, whether it's a typical Western diet or, let's say, an Afro-Caribbean diet. Some of the things that you can think of including on your plate, and that can help you ensure that you're having a healthy, balanced diet. Try to exercise. It's recommended, like NHS in the UK recommends at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise. This includes things like walking. You can walk to work and back home. It's not like, oh, if you always have to drive to look cool. It's great to look cool, but walking is important. You can walk to shopping. You can walk to uni, to wherever you're going to. Don't shy away from household chores, because those again can contribute towards burning of calories, of course. I've already mentioned the importance of sleep. Practice spending time sleeping 6 to 8 hours every night. That can help unwind, repair your body, and give you the energy you need to go. And of course, one of the things that I always think about is doing a body MOT. You can go to the doctors and say, can you look at my blood type, blood works, just let me see what is, like, let's say the profile of the different let's say iron and things like that in your blood. If you are, for example, during the winter months, you can go to the doctors and say, I want to just check my vitamin D content, so I know my starting situation, so that when I'm going through the winter months, I should be able to know I'm keeping enough vitamin D. Particularly, as I mentioned, it has an important factor to play when it comes to the immune function. And of course, understanding your body. I was talking to my students recently, and I was saying, we live in a world where we are all of us so much very busy that we kind of, in a way, forget to actually be in tune with our bodies. We no longer understand our bodies. But if you know your body, if you stay in touch with it, you'll know when you're coming down with something, and you will be able to look to figure out what it is, and maybe even attack it before it attacks you. So you can go, let's say, like some people can prefer things like massages just to relax the body. You can have things like visiting, let's say, like having a chat with like personal trainers if you're trying to lose weight and things like that, and just having those check-in points to say, I checked in or weighed in, and maybe I was this amount of weight, and maybe the next time you're checking in again, just to see that your anthropometric measurements are okay. And then the other thing is, always try to, of course, you can never say that you'll never have stress, but always try to identify what are some of the things that stress you. And then once you do that, always ask yourself, how do you respond to stress? If you're somebody that distresses by going to binge watching, going into unhealthy relationships with food that can easily spiral into things like eating disorders, you might want to again try to rethink and say, how can I establish a healthy relationship with myself and with food, so that I don't look at food as a comfort, like as a comforter or a pacifier. When I'm upset, I reward myself with food. When I'm happy, I reward myself with food. When I'm hungry, it gets to a point that you can tell yourself, okay, I'm upset. Instead of reaching out for chocolate to try and get rid of the anger, can I try to maybe process it by going out for a walk or by speaking to somebody about it? And that can be helpful. So I hope this has been something to help, and in particular in this season and in this time where we're kind of coming back into more normal lifestyle post-COVID, and maybe you're fighting with a little bit more pounds that you gained during COVID and thinking, how can I lose them and things like that. Maybe just looking after your physical well-being can be a good starting point.